Well, good morning. And as always, remember, this is the day the Lord's made. I'll rejoice and be glad in it. Well, today, by the way, if you missed our video from last week, that's because we didn't have one. We had an ice storm up here that shut everything down and broke a lot of tree limbs and even some trees over. And but they got it all taken care of. We still have a tree in our backyard that needs to be taken out. But it's springtime in the UP. Well, today I'd like to look at how God wants us to be. Our text is taken from Matthew chapter 9, verses 36 through 38, which I'll get into a little later on. There was a video that was, I think it was Super Bowl ad. It said, God gets us. And it said that God accepts us the way we are. And that's true. God does accept us the way we are. But the video implied that God would leave us like we are. He knows, for instance, if you lean toward being a bigot, well, that's just your nature. That's the way He made you. If you lean toward homosexuality, well, that's the way He made you. You just accept it. That is not true. God accepts us as we are. However, if we come to Him, He resides within us. He'll not allow us to remain the same. He'll begin His work in us and continue until we're in His image. And what is His image? It's the image of Jesus. And what is that? We must be moved. And how is that? Well, first of all, we see in our text that we'll be moved with compassion, just as Jesus was. In verse 36, the first part of the verse, it says, "But when He saw the multitudes, He was moved with compassion." In other words, be mindful of others. We need to see people as Jesus did. He was accused of being friends with sinners. You know, the Pharisees accused Him of that often. Well, we have a tendency to judge folks by their outward appearance. You see somebody with, scruffy clothes and all that stuff. By the way, up here, everybody accepts it because most of the people up here are loggers. And they have scruffy clothes because that's just part of the work. But I got a good illustration for you. There was a young lady in our church, a young lady that visited our church in Colorado. She came on what we called a watch night service. It was on a New Year's Eve night service where we watched the old year out, New Year in, with preaching, singing praises, and all of this. Her name was Sandy Willett. Now, she's gone on to be with the Lord now after battling cancer. I don't know how many times God cured her or put her cancer in remission, but it finally caught up with her. And I talked to her right before she passed away, and she said, "Brother Ray, I'm ready to go home. I'm tired of this. I'm ready to go home." And she did. She refused treatment and went home to be with the Lord. But anyway, on that particular watch night service, on New Year's Eve night, she came to the service, and I preached, And afterwards, I invited people to come to the altar like I do most of the time. If they need to be saved, they need to come to me and say, Brother Ray, I need to be saved, or we need to talk, or something, And anyway, Sandy came. And be honest with you, if I would have been judging her by her outside appearance, if I would have, let's put it this way, she wouldn't have been allowed in most churches in the South anyway, but most churches today, she wouldn't even been allowed in the door. Why? Well, first of all, she was a drug addict. Her hair probably hadn't been washed in months. Her teeth were green from all she did is smoke marijuana all day. And it was sad. I didn't even want to touch her, but I laid my hand on her when I was introducing her to Jesus. And when she prayed, everything changed. She began to grow and became just a darling of a Christian, a beautiful Christian lady. She, with God's help, kicked the drug habit, and after her second bout with cancer, she moved to Arizona, or maybe it was her third bout, I don't remember. But she moved down close to Phoenix because there was a cancer center, Cancer Treatment Center of America in Phoenix. And so she went down there for their assistance. And God put her in remission again. And she became, what would you call it? A person of encouragement to the people there that were battling cancer. And it was just amazing how many souls she touched with her witness and sharing Jesus and her love for these people that were battling cancer. Let me share this with you. We have a tendency to look on the outside appearance of people. Jesus looks on the heart, the inner soul, not the outside. We must see people in their condition, just as Jesus did. You see, especially in our society today, people are weary. That verse 36 says, but when he saw the multitude, he moved with compassion on them because they were weary. And believe you me, the majority of the people today are weary. They're people who are wandering. They've lost their way. The rest of that verse says, not only that they were weary, but that they were scattered like sheep having no shepherd. In other words, they couldn't find their way. People are waiting. They don't realize it. They know they need something, but they don't know what it is that they need. They're waiting, hoping things will get better. A lot of people voted for the president that we have now because they thought they were voting for the Messiah, I think. You hear a lot of them talk anyway. But listen to verse 37 and 38. It says, then he said, that is, Jesus said to his disciples, the harvest is truly plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. The harvest is ready. The harvest is waiting. All God needs, and by the way, God is the harvester, not us. All he needs is a conduit or an avenue to work in. I read this recently. I don't remember where, but talking about the harvest being plentiful and the laborers being few. In 1994, in Chicago, a 15-year-old boy, Chris Searcy, was playing basketball on a public court out in the open when a car stopped and shot him in the head. He lay bleeding to death in an alley just steps away from a hospital. His friends grabbed him up and started carrying him, but they could only carry him so far, and they gave out. And so one of them ran into the emergency room and told the people in there, my friend's outside, he's been shot, you need to come help him. Come, doctors, I need a doctor, I need nurses, come help him. But the emergency room workers refused to treat him, saying that it was against the policy to go outside. Now, they were not moved with compassion, and it contributed to his death. I may add this. There was a police officer that saw what was going on, and he commandeered a wheelchair and rushed outside, picked Chris Searcy up and put him in that wheelchair, rolled him into the emergency room. Then the people began to work on him, but it was too late. He died. Let me say this. We must choose to be moved. If we say, well, if God wants me to do something, he'll move me to do it. Not if you're not willing. God doesn't force himself on anyone. You must allow those around you to move you. Don't build a wall between you and them. Let them move you. Those people that should have been working on Chris to save his life made excuses to abandon him. And like I said, the only one that even took issue or took initiative to try to get him in there was his friends and that police officer that got the wheelchair. Now, you may remember a few years ago, there was an Italian ship named the Concordia. And I believe that was the name of it. But anyway, it ran aground and was beginning to sink. And there was 30 people that lost their lives because of that. But when they started saying, where's your captain, what's he telling us to do? The captain had already lit a shot. He was in the first lifeboat out. He didn't help anyone. It's terrible. Now the captain's supposed to go down with the ship, and what that means, that doesn't mean he has to literally drown with the ship. But what it means is he has to make sure that those in his charge, that is all the passengers of the ship, gets off safely. If there's anyone that can't get off safely, then he's not to get off safely either. That captain said, hey, what was I supposed to do? It was dark and cold, and you know, I'm just one man. Pretty calloused, I'd say. So we need to allow people to move us. I'm not talking about to take us from this place to another place. I'm talking about that we need to be moved with emotion. We need to be moved to do something. If nothing else, we need to be moved to pray. Look at verse 38. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send laborers into the harvest. You know, when I first came to Curtis Baptist Church, the people would come up to me and say, we need this, we need that, we need Sunday school teachers, we need, you know, whatever, different ministries. We need to do this. And I would say, okay, when are you going to start? I hate to say it, but pretty soon people stopped asking me or telling me we need to do something. But the beautiful part of it is many of them would just do it. And that's the way God works. He wants us to let people move in us so that we can do the work. We need to be moved like firemen. And I know that's an old term. It should be fire or what do you call it? Rescue personnel, first responders. None of that was around when I was on the fire department. And by the way, I retired from the Dallas Fire Department. But anyway, we need people like firemen, policemen, EMS workers, those that we now call first responders. They're the ones that go in when everyone else is leaving. You know, oddly enough, fire draws people. Almost every fire that I went to, we had trouble getting to the actual fire because people would park their cars in the street and get in our way. And on more than one occasion, the driver just put the bumper of the fire engine in the back of the car and just pushed them out of the way. We had to do that in order to get in. But I remember one fire. It was down by what we call Fair Park. It was the State Fair of Texas, and in right outside of Fair Park, there was a train derailment. We didn't know what it was. The alarm came in and said you had, a house on fire, and gave us the address. When we turned off down there, we were about a quarter of a mile from there, and people were running away from it. And we thought, my goodness, this must really be bad. Because not are they going toward it, they're running away from it. And they were a good quarter mile away, and we're still running away from it. Well, when we got there, there was first of all, there was 2 houses that were burning. But what caused them, there was a 25,000-gallon propane container car. In other words, a tanker car. that had 25,000 gallons of propane. And it had ruptured and caught on fire, and it was blowing fire out, and it set these two houses on fire. Well, every now and then that thing would rumble and shake the ground, literally. And I remember my brother-in-law was also, my wife's brother, was also on the same piece of equipment I was on, there on the fire department. And we were both right up as where you go up to the tracks on top. We were laying there with a 2.5-inch hose with 1,000 gallons a minute of water being put on that fire. And there were several others around hosing the fire down, trying to get everything cooled down. And the ground rumbled. And my brother-in-law said, if this thing blows up, I'm going to just slide down in this ditch and let it blow right on over me. I looked at him. His name was Horace. I looked at him and I said, Horace, if this thing blows up, there's not going to be a ditch there for us to slide down into. But that was one of the few times on the fire department that I was unnerved. I was afraid or scared. But whew, I tell you, anyway, I'll move on. The most significant thing is doing the most for others. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. If I think I'm better than somebody, I'm not going to minister to them. I'm not going to serve them. And by nature, we all have that tendency. We must make a conscious effort to look at people as better than ourselves. When we're moved, we should be moved to pray. Pray for the situation, pray for the individual, pray for yourself that God will use you to reach that individual. Prayer should be our first move, not a last resort. You know, there's an old joke that went around, and it's still valid today. But there's a group of people in church, and they said that there was a situation, and so the pastor said, we need to pray about it. They said, has it come to that? In other words, that's the last option? No, should be our first. You know, the reason we don't have what we need, even though God says he'll supply our needs, the reason we don't have is because we don't pray about it. We buckle up and bow our neck and say, I can do this, you know. But listen, James chapter 4, verse 2 says, you don't have because you don't ask. We need to ask. Ask for help from God. We need to ask that God will use us in every situation. And finally, we need to move to participate. Verse 38 says, therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers into his harvest. Now, who are the laborers? We are. We need to pray that he will motivate us to go out into the harvest. And then we need to make up our mind to go. By the way, this is a command. It's not a suggestion. This sums up what we call the Great Commission in Matthew 28, 19, 20, where it says, go into all the country or all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to do all things that I command you. Let me tell you, these are things we ought to be doing. You say, well, that's what we pay you for, preacher. No. First of all, you don't pay me. You help support me. God is the one that dictates to me what I'm supposed to do. Prayer plus precipitation. Prayer plus participation is what we need. Prayer without participation is like praying for a job without going to apply for it. I remember when Joel was in high school. Joel is our son. When he was in high school, I told him, I said, you need to see about getting a job. He said, okay. He went around collecting, or at least I put it that way, collecting job applications. Because he wasn't turning any of them in. Then he couldn't figure out why he wasn't getting a job. I told him, I said, you got to fill it out and give it back to him. You know, we have people in church that have been collecting membership applications, I guess, for years. It's amazing to me. We don't have that many people coming to join our church, but yet I produce these applications in lots of 5 at a time. And I probably go through 30, 40, 50, 60 a year. We ought to have that many people joining every year if everybody that took an application filled it out and turned it in. But we don't. Listen. As I said, praying is the first step. But going is required. That's what determines obedience or disobedience. It's kind of like the son in the parable that Jesus talked about that said he would go to work for his dad, but he didn't. But then his younger son, or maybe it was the older son, I don't remember which, but anyway, his other son said that he would not go to work for him in the field, but he went. Now, which one of them, in Matthew chapter 21, verses 28 through 31, Jesus ends it with which one was obedient? Well, obviously, the one that went to work, not the one that said he would go to work. There's a saying that I have. It's probably not original to me. I don't remember where I got it. But incomplete obedience is complete disobedience. Then we see that giving is required. First of all, giving of your time. You know, that's the most valuable thing that we have. It's our time. We're limited. We're not limited with our money. I've had $5 in the bank, and I've had a lot more than that in the bank. But I'm limited to how much time I have on this earth. Matter of fact, with my last heart attack, I thought that my time was up. But it wasn't. God says, get back in the race. You know, it's kind of like here in Michigan, they've started putting in roundabouts everywhere. It's like a badge of courage, I guess. But anyway, it was kind of the first one I ever saw was in Waco, Texas, and it was huge. I mean, it probably took up 10 acres or 5 anyway, and there was, I don't remember. I want to say there was like 8 different highways that intersected there, or came into it. And there was a service station on it. And I remember the joke was the guy went round and round and round and round. He didn't know what to do because it's the first time he had ever seen one. And he pulled in the service station because he was running out of gas, and the service station attendant ran out there, put the nozzle in, wiped off his windshield, told him, said, "Get back out there, I think you're in third place." Well, I thought it was funny anyway. But not only are we to give our time, we're to give a tithe. The first 10% of everything that comes to us, including time and everything else, belongs to the Lord. It's His. Malachi, well, I know it's in Malachi, I can't remember exactly where. It says, bring all your tithes into the storehouse, and there'll be room. And he says, and I will open up the windows of heaven. Try me with this, he says. I will open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing on you that you can't even think about how great it is. And then, let me say this. Another good illustration is in 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 24, where King David saw the threshing floor that belonged to another man, and it was flat and smooth and big, and so he went to buy it. He said, I want to buy your threshing floor because we're going to build a temple for God, and we need this flat surface. And the man said, that being the case, if you want it, you can have it. And David said, no. Matter of fact, he said, I'll not offer that which costs me nothing. So David ended up buying the threshing floor at a fair price. Now then, we need to be careful and realize that everything belongs to God. He just lets us use it. Also, I want you to notice we need to give your talent. Whatever talent God has given you, you need to do it for Him. That's the reason He's given it to you. He's not giving it to you so you can be more rich. He's not giving it to you so that you can impress people. He's not giving it to you so that you can draw a spotlight on yourself. He's giving it to you to glorify Him. You know, salvation belongs to the Lord. In Luke chapter 19, verse 10, Jesus says, the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost. But He chooses to use us to carry out the process. Why He would want to choose lowly old me to be a pastor has bumfuzzled me from the get-go. I know how I am. And believe me, I wouldn't want me as a pastor. But God is using me, and has for 43 years. If you realize that you've fallen short of God's command to minister and to witness to others, even to those who make you feel uncomfortable, like Sandy Willette did to me originally, please come. Make up your mind that you're gonna pray to be committed to His command, to be dedicated to pray, to be dedicated to talk to relatives or neighbors or co-workers, checkers at the store, your wait staff at the cafe or restaurant where you eat. Just any time you interact with someone else, be a witness to the Lord. Well, Brother Ray, I live my witness. Well, that's good, but you need to open up your mouth too. Be dedicated to help people with their needs. And their greatest need is Jesus. Have you chosen to be obedient? It's not automatic. It's a decision you must make and carry through. Are you going to choose to be obedient or disobedient? The choice is yours. And remember, incomplete obedience is complete disobedience. I trust that you'll just pray and tell God, first of all, that you're sorry that you've been disobedient. And then tell him, you got a brand new laborer in the field. I'm here ready to go. Hope you'll do that. If you do, shoot me a line or give me a call. Send me an email. Let me know. I'd like to rejoice with you. Until next time, God bless. Amen.